Welcome back to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and today I have with me a dear friend, Nancy Evans. She is the best-selling author of How to Build Your Personal Brand on Social Media, and she also has a new book that is just launching as of the date of this podcast called The Feel Good Business Model with her husband, Scott. And she is the owner of BYOB Agency and The Time to Grow, which focuses on business strategy and mastermind for entrepreneurs. So, welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, I mentioned a little bit in the beginning, but tell me a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I mean, I know we met actually at a mastermind that we were a part of, several years ago. Well, gosh, it's been more than several years ago actually at this point. But yeah, no, definitely, a huge entrepreneur. I absolutely love, running businesses, helping people run businesses, so on and so forth. And my history, I went to school for marketing, but kind of dove out of school right into managing teams, working kind of in the corporate world. And after doing that for over 10 years, I just really, in fact, I read the book 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss,
Yep.
and I kind of got that bug where I want to work less and have a happier life and kind of live on my own terms. And so I ended up diving into the world of entrepreneurship. I actually put my 2 weeks in. I was with Apple at the time, and actually put my 2 weeks in and decided to start my own business. And I from the ground up, I actually started a remotely run house cleaning business. Learned how to do it all from Reddit. An accountant had actually like built his business and documented it. So he was my hero. I kind of followed him and followed in his footsteps and built that business to a six-figure, a year business. And from there, I actually met my husband, who, at the time was just getting started with his LinkedIn coaching practice. And I started learning all the ins and outs of digital marketing and how to really grow and scale and build businesses online. And we did that for his business, and then we ended up following that, we built multiple businesses outside of that, and kind of the rest is history.
Okay. I
But
know.
yeah, no, it's so great. It's so funny. We joke, we're like, not everyone can do it. Definitely working with your spouse or significant other, takes a special skill. But we are like so yin and yang how we work, that it just naturally works so well. He's a really big, storyteller and connector, and just such an amazing, person whenever it comes to really building great relationships. And I kind of have more of the engineering brain where I'm in the background. How can we make things more productive and streamlined? And how can we put different tools in place to make our businesses run more effectively? And so I'm very kind of cut and dry and tangible. He's a little more again, storytelling and the behind the scenes. And he's just so good at that. So we work really well together, and we really play off our strengths, which has really been a lot of fun. It's made things fun.
Love that. That is so great. Okay, so let's kind of start. Tell me a little bit about your diagnosis, like how old you were, how it came to be, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I mean, it's still like is so crazy to think about, the day that I found out, that I had cancer. In fact, I remember it all started, at the time, it was a couple years ago. So, at the time, I'm like thinking how old I am. I'm 38, 37, 36. I was about 35, 36. And, I went in, I felt, honestly, I just felt this weird cramp, almost like a runner's cramp that just wouldn't go away. And it's, sometimes I tell people it's almost like an intuitive thing, sometimes when something's up with your body. And for me, I suffer, I have hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, so I have autoimmune, issues. And so obviously I have to watch my diet. I've got very, certain things that I know make me feel like garbage and things that make me feel good. And, I'm very in tune with my body. And so, feeling this pain, kind of this dull ache, it was almost like something poking me, just, it wasn't unbearable, but it was something that was just, getting my attention. And so when I went into my doctor initially, he had me get an ultrasound. Nothing came up. But I just felt we needed to do some deeper digging. And one thing that I've learned over my many years of life is that sometimes you need to be an advocate for yourself. And sometimes the doctors will say, oh, well, it's nothing. Nothing really came up. You're good. But I really kind of just pushed. And so I said, I really think that I need to, look a little bit deeper. And so from there, he did, totally took my lead, and he said, well, let's get you a CT scan. So I got the CT scan, and again, I just had this feeling, that just something, isn't completely right. And so on the CT scan, typically, right, you usually get your results, they drop in whatever patient portal that you have, and you can view them. And I noticed that they didn't. And so my doctor had called and said, let's set up an in-person visit for this Friday. And I just knew, I'm like, there's something going on. So, whenever we had met, I was remember sitting on the little, little puffy seat with the cover on it. And, he just sat there and he said, well, this isn't the news, that we were hoping to get. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, because at that point, I'm sorry, the CT scan, it looked like it was a cyst on my kidney. And so he had actually told me, you're so young, you're healthy, it's probably just a cyst. And in fact, my cousin's a doctor as well. And he's like, yeah, it's probably a cyst. You're like totally good. So we ended up getting an MRI. So again, took it another step just to kind of get everything checked. And that was, during the MRI is when we then booked the call, and he said, this isn't the results that we wanted. It's actually showing that you do have cancer on your kidney. But you know what? It's early. We should be good. And so on and so forth. So again, right there, just you have cancer.
Yeah.
It's kind of
There's
like,
three words you never want to hear.
it was so trippy. And again, I'm like sitting there, and going, what? Like, really? This is not how I thought this was really going to unfold, but I just had this weird intuition. Now, the other funny thing, though, is he said, this is totally unrelated to the pain that you've been feeling. This thing is so small that it's not what's causing you pain. And the odd thing enough is this pain kind of went away, and then it came back. And I mean, I've had this pain, it kind of goes and comes occasionally. It's probably my gallbladder or something. But it's just, kind of a weird thing. And it was a fluke incident that we even found it. And so, luckily enough, the next steps for us were to actually reach out, and my primary doctor had a really great connection to a doctor in Philly, and so on and so forth. But, the first thing that happened, the first roadblock that happened was, because at this point, right, when we find out you have cancer, it's like, all right, what do I need to do? Immediate next steps. But the first
How do I
roadblock,
get it out of me?
oh my gosh, yeah.
Right.
So the first next steps were, okay, let's get this, a surgery scheduled. Let's get the appointment scheduled. And the first kind of like almost heartbreak for me was the doctor that they had recommended as like the number one. My insurance, I had to be in state. So obviously as an entrepreneur, my insurance is, like what it is. And so we actually had to go to a doctor in state. And so this person who I was like putting on a pedestal, like, oh my gosh, this person's going to fix all my hopes, and dreams and my problems and everything, I wasn't able to see. And so I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. And so we ended up finding a doctor in New Jersey who was super busy, but luckily, could squeeze me in. And he is the one who, became my surgeon and ultimately did the surgery and everything. And, it's been a great experience with him, and everything went really well. But you don't realize the one thing that for me, right, we had a date for the surgery, right? We knew whenever it was going to be. I'm kind of one of those people, I always kind of joke and I keep things very light, and I just try to make the best out of every situation. It's kind of like how my dad was always, and I kind of like, I'm the same way. And I remember it was like a couple nights leading up to the surgery, a nurse called me and just was checking in on me, and she said, hey, how are you doing? She goes, are you having trouble sleeping? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, yeah, it's probably a little bit of the anxiety like leading up to surgery. And I'm like, oh, like, you know, it's like I didn't even, it was like subconsciously, right? I was scared. But like on the surface, I'm like, I'm so good, right? I got this, like, not a big deal. But, you know, I was very scared. You know, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I had already had abdominal surgery when I was younger. I actually had an abdominal hernia. And so, you know, I have a scar there. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what is this going to be? You know, it's like they're going to go in and, you know, have to operate on my kidney. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to collect, you know, a whole other situation. And then I also was like, am I going to need, you know, a Foley bag? Am I going to need this? And so, you know, again, I'm kind of like in this spiral of like wondering what this is going to, you know, actually look like. But anyway, so had the surgery. Everything went really well. It was funny because, you know, I was kind of out of it, but the intern who was there at the time came in and was like, oh my gosh, it was the coolest thing ever. They actually had to flip your kidney and like onto the medical tape, and they had to flip it out and then cut it out. And I'm like, okay.
I want to know this.
Like a whole acrobatic thing that apparently happened in my body because it was in a weird spot. But anyway, he shared all that with me. But I just, oh my goodness, like I felt like I just told Scott, I mean, I felt so bad. Like after my surgery, I just wanted to be pushed into a ditch and like I was like, just leave me. Like I felt awful. You know, and obviously like, you know, they have to cut through the muscle and everything. And I couldn't stand up straight. You know, obviously I was in bed for quite a while, and, you know, it took me a while to get back on track. I mean, for me, I mean, I gave myself almost a full month to kind of, you know, get back on track. And, you know, at that time, you know, my husband had to take care of me. And it's one of those things where, again, I was so vulnerable. You know, I'm someone who I like to get dressed and I like to do my hair and I like to wear my makeup. And it's like, oh my gosh, I just was in the worst, you know, place physically and mentally just because I was so vulnerable. And, you know, again, I wasn't myself and I couldn't do the normal things that I did. And, you know, I remember I was kind of like hunched over, like, you know, I forget what, the Igor. I was
Yeah.
like,
Hunchback
I
of
was
Notre
like,
Dame, yeah.
yeah. And he was like, he was having to like shower me and I'm like hunched over and I just, you know, felt terrible. I didn't want to see anyone, you know, I just was, you know, kind of wanted to just be by myself. But, you know, it was a very vulnerable time. And I'm just grateful because here's the thing, right? You know, in my situation, it was a fluke thing that we caught it. You know, it was a fluke thing that we caught it so early. You know, meeting with one of the kidney doctors in between all of this, I had asked, I said, well, you know, what if we hadn't caught it? And he said, well, you would have been dead probably by the time you're 45.
Wow.
And I'm
Okay.
like,
Because they
whoa.
don't do tests like, you know, a mammogram or a colonoscopy. They don't test for kidney cancer.
No, and so many people, it was really kind of interesting because, you know, going in and out of the kidney and the urologist, I was definitely by far the youngest person, right? You know, I mean, there were lots of people in their 80s and 70s, you know, in and out of the office. And, you know, here's little me, you know, kind of sitting in the corner, just, you know, like, holy cow, this is crazy. But I know that other people, right, you know, are going through certain things. And I know that this isn't just a one off. Like, I know that other people, in fact, I hear it more and more. And, you know, we talked about it. Younger people kind of coming out of the woodwork and, you know, having colon cancer and having kidney cancer and having, you know, all these different things. And so I think it's so important. And what it's really shifted my mindset, you know, mentally is, you know, we've got to be advocates for our own health and we have to be proactive, right? You know, if you feel a certain way, and again, the dull ache was kind of a fluke thing. Again, I think it was somebody watching out for me, you know, giving me a little gentle poke. Could have been my dad, you know, could have been, you know, I don't know. But the thing is I really feel that, you know, you've got to get yourself checked out. I think proactive, you know, being, you know, someone who gets those things done proactively, it just sets you up in such a better shape. You know, there was even my virtual assistant, in fact, Amber, she is absolutely amazing. She lost her dad way too early because he had an aortic aneurysm. Okay. And I know this isn't cancer, but it was something that she said he could have prevented. There's a program actually called Lifeline screening. So anyone can go. And it's actually a really affordable screening that you can do. And I actually just did it in January. And what they do is they check for aneurysms, they check your heart, they do like an EKG, they check everything. They'll do an ultrasound to check your arteries. They'll make sure everything's flowing, working well, and they'll check, your cholesterol, all the basic stuff, right? So that was really important, right? And she had shared with me that if her dad had had that done, which he was supposed to get it done, it could have prevented, him actually dying. And so those types of things, right, that are available to us, we don't hear about them very often. Even visiting our own primary care doctors, we don't know the questions that we can ask. Just if you got the question or you want to, check, or you want to do a little additional, digging into finding out maybe some of your health issues, don't be afraid to ask. So that's been my biggest thing. And, if anyone who's listening, right, you've had a feeling, or maybe you have a family member and, you're worried, or you want to get an extra check just to make sure that you're okay, do it, right? Life's too
Right.
short, not to put yourself, as a priority. Like, you got to take care of you. No one cares about you as much as you, right? You've got to take care of your own well-being, and you've got to make sure that you're all good to go. And there's just so many things out there, and again, I'm an entrepreneur. I might not have the best health insurance in the whole world, but there are a lot of things that we can do to be proactive in our health, and to obviously prevent anything further from happening. And so, yeah, I mean, that's been a little bit about my story, but luckily, again, the surgery kind of took care of things. Now I do get checked every 6 months. I've got to go back and get a CT scan. So, again, every time I get that CT scan, it just feels so good, because it's almost like a blank slate, like, all right, here we go. But that's definitely, it's kind of just it's on my radar, it's part of my routine. But yeah.
Well, and you brought up a really good point, and I hear that often, and it was kind of that way for me too. Is listen to your intuition, like you listen to your gut, whether whether it's just this gut feeling, whether you believe that God is whispering in your ear or whatever, and really be proactive. But you also have to kind of look at, because I looked at this for me, and I've been asking my doctor, like, okay, how do I get tested? Because breast cancer can come back like in the brain or in the bones, and there's no test for that. And she said, oh, well, we just watch out for symptoms. And I'm like, well, by the time I have symptoms, like we have a real problem. But you can also like get over, I guess, and I don't even know what the word is, but like, oh, I want this test and this test and this test and this test. And that can actually, lead to more anxiety, just this whole, okay, I got to know everything going on in my body. And that tends to, again, have its own piece of anxiety. So like, what would you say as far as, I mean, your VA, like her dad died of an aneurysm. So that's a really important thing for her. But I don't necessarily think that it's important for everybody to have that test done, especially if there's no, pre-existing conditions or anything like that. So what would you recommend for people for screenings or proactive things that aren't going to lead to total overwhelm?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I just like, I mean, I personally like peace of mind. I just like kind of knowing, what's going on in there.
Mhm.
And for me, so the test that I mentioned earlier, the Lifeline screening, I forgot to actually mention, they do screenings for like men and also for women, like specific. So, examples of other things that they check for are thyroid issues. So, a lot of women, in fact, again, I mentioned before, but I have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which there are more women, I can guarantee, in this country that have been not diagnosed, and doctors are treating them for other things. But whenever you don't diagnose Hashimoto's or autoimmune diseases, they turn into other things.
Right.
MS, they turn into, sometimes cancer, they turn into rheumatoid arthritis, they turn into other things. But it's almost like, in doing the research myself, I kind of went backwards and I'm like, wait, what could have caused some of the things that happened in my body? Because, one test that I did, I actually wanted to see if I was a carrier of cancer, meaning like, is this something that I could potentially pass down to, maybe a future child or something like that? And no, it isn't. It's something that I whipped up myself, like it's in here. And so I know a lot of stress and burnout and, things that I did and inflammation in my body. In fact, I kind of went down that rabbit hole because doctors, you mentioned it before, like symptoms, right? Doctors were kind of like, oh, you know what,
Right.
you're good now. You're good. And it's
So be
like, well,
your own
no,
advocate.
what the
Yeah.
H, caused it? What the heck? What actually caused this? So anyway, but the testing that they do, so the women testing, they do thyroid, they'll do some of the hormonal testing. They also test for stroke, if you're at risk for strokes, your vascular, so they test a lot of different things. And I think you can check, certain things. So again, it's called Lifeline screening. I think it's really affordable. So I would tell people that's a great place to go just to kind of get a peace of mind, an overview of what's going on in there in the circulatory system. But whenever it comes to your primary doctor, and I'm even going to quote mine, okay, as much as I love my doctor, multiple times he has said to me, well, we treat the symptoms. Okay, because I've told him multiple times, I'm like, I don't want to take if I have acid reflux or something, I'm not going to take the pill that's going to give me more acid reflux. Like I'm not, and so their answer at a lot of the doctors in America, their answers are we treat symptoms. They don't necessarily treat the root causes of things. And so, again, going back to what you should be tested on and what you shouldn't, I mean, I think, again, just be an advocate for yourself, follow your intuition. I know that sounds kind of like, whatever, but, if you feel, not 100% and you're feeling like you might be off, even with my thyroid issues, I mean, I was not myself. I was sick every single day. I was nauseous every day. I felt horrible. I was on the couch. I was depressed. It was like a little dark cloud was over me at all times. And, so many people just chalk it up to, oh, well, that's just how it is, and I'm tired by 3. That's normal, but it's not. And so, if you're feeling off, okay, just do a gut check, kind of look at really like how you're feeling. Get out of the weeds of the everyday, being busy and running around and actually just check in on yourself. How are you feeling? But there are different doctors now. I did have an integrative medicine doctor for a while, integrative medicine specialist. Actually went through and they did a lot more thorough testing on root causes, inflammation, food allergies, different things like that that can lead to other things. And so there are certain avenues that you can take. Unfortunately, those are a little bit more expensive. Insurance doesn't cover, integrative specialists at this time, but I decided to go down that avenue because I wanted to know what was causing the inflammation and things like that. But I would just say go with your gut. Talk to your primary. Some are better than others at kind of navigating and being supportive in that way, and do a little research, to dig in a little bit more at how you're feeling.
And so kind of what have you done since then to help, you know, like change things to, hopefully prevent it from returning? Kind of what kind of lifestyle changes have you made since then?
Yeah, that's a great question because so much. So, well, a couple things, right? I think it's mental and it's physical. For me, being more present, whenever I think about my life, right? I definitely am one of those people who kind of used to always be in fight or flight. And, it's like, things happen. And it's like, I kind of get stressed or anxiety or I get kind of worked up. But, I've been so much more mindful of those things because we don't realize how much stress and just overwhelm and things like that can build up and cause cancer in our body. And, I have a history. I mean, back whenever I worked, in my previous positions and things like that before being an entrepreneur and doing things on my own, I kept hitting burnout. I would work so many hours a week and I would feel completely exhausted. And there's no doubt in my mind that it almost felt like something broke inside me. I hit my limit. And during all of that, my dad got into a motorcycle accident. And so I lost, my dad, which was a really huge hit. And so it was a multitude of things that just kind of made me I don't know. I mean, it just was a huge stressor. And so I have no doubt that a lot of that stress built up and, could have caused some issues. So I think from a mindset standpoint, I really try to be so much more present. I try to keep my life as peaceful, and my energy good. I like to surround myself with people who are positive. I've obviously had people in my life that were just very negative and kind of what we call energy vampires, and I kind of moved away from that and refused to let those people back into my life because it's not helping, right, this situation. I got to protect this. And so that's the mental side of things. As far as the physical side of things, I did make a lot of changes. I went completely gluten free. I don't think gluten's good for anyone, in all honesty. I think
I
that
agree.
was probably the biggest energy shift for me. Whenever I went gluten free, I felt so much better. Like bloated, what is that, right? I actually, going from bloated every single day to like feeling awesome.
Yeah.
So gluten free, dairy free, I absolutely lactose intolerant, so just cut that all out. Started eating, more organic, more whole, fresh foods. I definitely had an allergy test, and was surprised to find a lot of things that were causing inflammation in my body. Meat, beef actually was one of my number ones. And so there's certain things that I just cut out of my diet. And whenever I tell you that your food and what you eat and everything, it literally is the fuel for your body, can
Absolutely.
change everything. I literally just shifting to a healthier diet and eating the right foods that really fuel me in the right way. My cognitive function, right? The brain fog is like a quarter of what it used to be. My energy levels, I feel great like all day long. It's not like I crash at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I feel great. In fact, my coffee, I drink half calf because caffeinated, full calf. The old Nancy needed like energy drinks out the wazoo to keep going. This is enough for me. In fact, I don't even drink the full cup. I drink like a quarter of it because that's enough. I don't need, what I used to need. So diet change has been absolutely huge. Again, my like everything, just taking care of yourself, moving your body, right? Keeping yourself active has been absolutely impactful. And I think, those are two obviously aspects you need to think about for sure. So.
Right. And I love that you bring up the mental aspect of it because, we talk about eating better and moving your body and getting rid of toxins and all of those things, but the mental aspect of the huge amounts of stress that we are under all the time, that those just wreak havoc in your body. When I was a chiropractor, I used to say, 95% of disease is either stress caused or stress is a contributing factor. And we don't ever take the time to slow down and really address that piece. So I'm so glad that you started with that because while everything is important, sometimes I think that the stress piece is the most important in all of this and being able to regain and keep our health.
Absolutely. It's funny because the message today, so we do a mindset call every Monday for our, mastermind. And I talked about, the three kind of like triangle points of fear, that like often hold us back. And one of the things that I talked about is like the number one question and where I want everyone to kind of live in is always go back to the question. Like when you're feeling overwhelmed or anxiety or you're feeling like out of control or you're feeling stressed, always go back to what can I control? Right? What
Mhm.
can I control? Right? You can't control other people. You can't, look over here and complain about all those things. What can you control? So, in this situation, right, diet, mindset, health, having control of those things are definitely huge and pivotal in your overall health.
Um, all right. So, I guess what would be your biggest piece of advice for someone who has had a diagnosis and has gone through, the treatments or is going through treatments moving forward for, living your best life, making the most out of the current situation that they're in?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And I think we even talked about this before. It's cancer diagnosis can be one of the scariest, worst, awful things in the whole world, but it can also be a blessing in disguise in a way. And the reason why I say that, right, I look around and I see so many people who have been impacted by cancer, but until you have it, it really kind of slaps you in the face. And for me, I just felt like I'd almost put myself on autopilot. And I kind of like started playing small a little bit, meaning I was not doing the things I really wanted to. I have so much inside me, right? I wanted to write my book and I hadn't yet at the time. It had been sitting on the idea shelf for a while. And then, I want to write a screenplay. Actually, I'm in the process of writing that right now. But like I had all these
Wow.
things I wanted to do. And cancer actually gave me almost like the fuel, right, to actually get some of these things to the finish line. And so for me, my book got done. I told my husband, I'm like, I just got diagnosed with cancer. Life is freaking short. Like, what are we waiting around for? And it's like, of all people, it's like I've dealt with so much loss, and it's like, left and right. And it's like, losing my dad and, going through so many different things. It really just smacks you in the face. And it is so personal. And no one really talks about it or can really, I think, convey it. But like going to get like my MRI, just to give you an example, like the amount of blood work, right, that I had to get done, the MRI, I actually had a panic attack in the MRI machine. Lost it because I'm a little bit claustrophobic. Tears streaming down my face. I'm crying my eyes out. I'm literally like my heart is beating out of my chest. With the ladies in there, I'm listening to music. I mean, some of the music that was on still triggers me, to this
Oh
day.
my gosh.
But like, these things, and I remember walking out and just feeling like, so lonely, and so alone in my experience. And again, of course I had my husband, of course I have friends, and people like that, but no one really knows it as much as you and what you're going through. And it's like no one's in your body. And it's just an experience that if you get diagnosed with cancer, it's just so freaking personal. And for me, again, I just used it as so much fuel because I think you have to look at it either way. It's either
Mhm.
going to crush you, make you miserable, depressed, scared, you're curled up in a ball, or it's going to make you have like what Marie Forleo calls FU fuel, right? It's like,
Right.
this is going to give me rocket fuel to live my life better, and to make smarter choices and to take care of myself and to actually start, doing things differently, and getting things done that I want to get done, and not playing small because it gives you that little encouragement. Like, again, life is short. And sometimes it takes those really pivotal, kind of crazy things to happen to give you that little wake up call. So, for sure.
And sometimes that's, the universe, God's way of saying, "Hey, I got things for you to do, and it's time for you to take care of yourself to be able to do them." So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
all right. Well, Nancy, where can people find you if people want to reach out to you? Yeah, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, you can definitely check us out. So the website is thetimeToGrow.com. That's where, my husband and I, we actually have, multiple programs that we have for entrepreneurs, people who are looking to grow their businesses online, for service providers. So, for example, coaches, consultants, professionals of that nature. We also are coming out with our brand new book. So it should be available by the time this podcast drops. So you can check it out. In fact, you can go right on Amazon and search for The Feel Good Business Model. The book is going to be blue with yellow letters. So it's going to be big and bright and easy to find, hopefully. But definitely check it out. And, the Feel Good Business Model, the book that we wrote, is actually really kind of also formed around, the way that my husband and I really believe, is a great way to run your business so that you have a better life and you have more time to spend on the things that you really want to, because life is short, right? Things happen, and, we get news that sometimes, knocks us off our path a little bit sometimes, but, doesn't have to crush your whole world. And so we teach you how to actually set up a business and build a business, that not only you love, but it's flexible so that you can take off time to take care of yourself and spend time with family and friends and whatever you really want to do. So we want to spread that out there to everyone else as well.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I always love our conversations. And I'm so happy that you are healthy and everything is going great for you right now. And, congratulations on the book. And I know that it is going to be a huge bestseller as well. So,
Thank you so much.
all right. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Bye bye.
Bye.